The company that we're about to bring up is called DarcMatter, and they're a little bit too technical, so I got to read it off here. DarcMatter is a global, award-winning FinTech platform for alternative investments to increase transparency and access. I don't know if anyone here has raised funds for an LP or to manage your own crypto funds, but it's a nightmare. The paperwork is insanely crazy. It's part of the reason why we haven't raised capital. So these guys are actually changing how GPs and LPs work together and find each other. Today, it's an existing business. They have over $10 billion in assets under management. We met Sang in New York. Sang's back there. So we met Sang in New York, and he bought us Korean barbecue, and now we're working together. So please welcome Sang Lee.
All right, good afternoon, Seoul. Come on, let's get some energy up in here. Before we get started, I want to thank Hash for putting this all together. So let's give everybody a round of applause for Hash right now. All right, here we go. So as Alex mentioned, we had some Korean barbecue in New York. I couldn't find a better choice to buy them dinner, so I just defaulted to what I knew. So we ended up, it was their second day, I think, in New York, and I ended up buying them Korean barbecue, and then in Korea, they bought me some more Korean food as well. But now, we're so proud and so lucky to be part of the Hash family. And we have the opportunity today to share with you a little bit of our vision and what we're doing at DarcMatter. My name is Sang Lee, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of DarcMatter, which, as Alex mentioned, is a global fintech platform that's streamlining the entire asset management space. But before I get into a lot of details, I want to talk about something that everybody probably is pretty familiar with. So who remembers this announcement in 2008? The financial crisis with Lehman collapses, Bear Stearns gets bought out, all the banks get bailed out, but not retail investors or their investments. Over 20 million jobs were lost in 2008, and about 45% of all global wealth was estimated to be wiped out within the 18 months following the Lehman collapse. So what was the actual impact of all of this? Was it that banks failed and banks were restructured? Sure, there was something like that. But in reality, it only affected the Main Street investors because they were subject to the lack of transparency and things that they didn't understand on how banks worked or financial products worked. So I was a part of this in 2008 as an investment banker, looking into the core heart of the problem and basically realizing that a lot of change needed to be done, and we needed to do it from the inside out. So DarcMatter right now is a leading technology platform that's connecting investors from all around the world with different kinds of asset management products in a transparent and efficient way. Asset management is probably the largest industry in the world. $72 trillion of assets are actively being managed right now. But there's a problem because global wealth is anticipated to grow to $224 trillion, which leaves $150 trillion of wealth that's being unmanaged or not creating wealth for the underlying investor. And why is that? What is the issue that exists in the industry today? The asset management industry probably faces some of the worst problems we've ever seen across the board. There's a massive lack of transparency. So I, as an investor, when I invest in a product, I pretty much never know what I'm actually getting into. But the funny thing is, as regulators are working to protect investors, it's making things worse for the investors themselves, because the paperwork is becoming more complicated and more difficult to understand, which means I actually have no idea what I'm investing in, but regulators and governments and centralized organizations keep telling me that I'm safer and I'm better off. But these products are even worsely managed by the fact that you can only buy them from a conflicted intermediary. And what do I mean by a conflicted intermediary? I have no incentive to protect you or sell you the best possible product. My incentive is to sell you the thing that makes the most money for me. In the United States, we call them the DOL laws. There's so many laws that are changing because people are getting ripped off in their retirement funds, because advisors are putting in products that were not appropriate for them, and they didn't understand what these products were. And they end up getting wiped out. They end up not being able to pay for their kids' colleges. But at the same time, because of all these regulations and more protections and more centralized organizations and more intermediaries that regulators are saying are good for the system, the costs are increasing over time. And when the costs increase over time, what do I do as the asset manager or the person that's supposed to be working with you to make your situation better? I stop selling to you. I stop selling to you because you're a Main Street investor, and that's just a headache. It's costing me more money. So what do? I keep going back to the sophisticated institutionals, the centralized organizations where I can get a $10 million check for the same cost as getting a $10,000 check. Even in the logical sense of the word, you would never do business like that because it's too expensive. So how are we fixing it today? We've already created a platform for 3.5 years to create a direct connection capability between the investor and the asset manager while streamlining the compliance and the workflow so that the fund manager themselves also has a better time and is able to access these investors in a very efficient way. And we're the first ones to do cross-border investments. What is a fintech platform if it doesn't provide investors all around the world with the same level of access as you can from Wall Street? And we've penetrated globally with just 4 offices located in New York, Ukraine, Shanghai, and Seoul. We've penetrated over 26 countries. So investors from over 26 countries can access different investment opportunities that they never would have seen before. And we're working with some of the top funds, 150 plus globally, and hopefully we can have Hashed on there as well when they do realize that the fund is going to be in fruition. And we're continuing to work with these organizations to show them that the decentralized and the non-intermediated effect is actually better for everybody in the long run. And we used to think that this was a Wall Street problem when I first started, that this was a US problem because US investors were very sophisticated. They've been investing in these things for over 60, 70 years. So we went all around the world and asked the question, hey, is this a problem that needs to be solved? And globally, they told us, both from the technology front as well as from the traditional financial services front, this is something that needed to be changed. We've actually never had a client say no when they're using our platform because the underlying need for change is so imperative and so expensive and so conflicted that everybody knows that the change is coming. It's just a matter of when and how. And the cryptocurrency world tends to conflict itself with Wall Street. But in reality, we have a little bit of a different stance. We need to bring them into the community. They have to be participants in the ecosystem so that they can protect the integrity and align their own interests when they're working with people all around the world. So we have advisors, asset management companies, banks. They need to cater in a better way, and they realize that they too will become disintermediated as a part of this change. So while we've run this platform for 3.5 years, we realize that the next step of efficiency and access comes from true decentralization. It's not enough to be disintermediated. It has to align the interests of everybody that's participating in the system so that the access to the investors and the protections that are provided to the investors are not brought about by centralized governments or regulatory arms or third-party administrators. We have to provide the protections to ourselves. The investors are able to protect themselves, and the asset managers or the traditional firms can no longer take advantage of this situation because they have to be directly aligned to the structural integrity of the ecosystem, or they'll get wiped out as well. What's happening when we implement blockchain into what we're doing today? with the global ecosystem that will be the foundational component of our blockchain project. There's no more need for paperwork. Right now, we've done a pretty good job of disintermediating, but the paperwork itself doesn't change. I don't know if anyone has seen fund prospectuses or if you have a 401k or retirement fund. It could be up to 300 pages. I've never read one in my entire life. And the thing about that is that actually creates massive conflicts of interest to actually push complicated things to investors. In a smart contract, the actual interactions themselves are not brought about by people, but about with the technology and the hash, as everybody knows here. Like I mentioned just previously, the blockchain system allows us to align the interests of those that are creating the wealth and those that are consuming the wealth. And what do I mean by that, really? There's a massive moral hazard issue in financial services. When I invest with you, I have no incentive to do good by you, because I'm making money regardless. But in this system, with skin in the game, you actually have to contribute and pay into the system to protect the compliance and the smart contracts that are the underlying component of all wealth management that we see in the future. And thirdly, we can remove fraud and error. Madoff is physically impossible in the blockchain. That means every single person that invested in Madoff had to lie to each other and then lie to the news at the same time. That's physically impossible to create a Ponzi scheme using a blockchain consensus system. And error, there's massive amounts of error that are happening even at the biggest banks. And what do? They just pay the $75 million in fines to the SEC and FINRA. That's the easiest way forward. Business as usual. We can avoid all of that with the blockchain upgrade. And what we're really excited about is democratizing access for all wealth management and wealth creation products across the board. Like I mentioned previously, there's no incentive if it's not efficient for me to talk to a smaller investor versus a larger investor. Why would I ever do that when it's costing me the same amount of time and money? But if I can provide that efficiency and the transparency for that access, we can bring in the wealth creation capabilities that Wall Street had and spread it across the entire world, into every kind of region through technology and not through large banks. So what are we doing right now? The DM coin is going to provide that utility, the transparency, and that access so that investors all around the world will have equal level of transparency and protection and even better access than we see right now without the need for intermediaries, without the need for third parties, and potentially even without the need for complicated government regulations. That's the future of wealth management, where any investor in the world has the same level of access and protection that they would have, or even better than what we have right now. And the team is actually pretty uniquely situated for a blockchain situation. And what do I mean by that? We come from very diverse professional backgrounds, from the top organizations in the world, working in communication, innovation, investment banking, and technology. But we're probably also the most culturally diverse blockchain team in the world. And what does that really mean for us as a company? It means that we bring diverse backgrounds in understanding how a global community can really integrate, understanding the underlying cultural nuances of different places, and bringing that to bear through a globalized, decentralized wealth distribution and creation system. If you have any questions, we'll be around for the rest of the day, or feel free to shoot us a note. Thank you very much.
Wow. Dude, Saint's really good on